All right, it's past 7:30. I'd like to call this business meeting of the Board of Education of School District 116 to order. Roll call, please, Amy.
Member Orr? Here. Member Ogolski?
Here.
Member Hasanadka?
Here.
Member Hall is here, and President Pulowski.
Here, members Carter and Exum are arriving shortly. We do have modification of the agenda we'd like to propose to accommodate some schedules for our speakers tonight. We'd like to move item 12.4, the administrative personal item, before section 8. And immediately following that, we'd like to move section 10.1 for the Sola Gratia Farm before the equity policy review as well. So we'll do 12.4, 10.1, and then into 8.1. Citizen statements. We've received one citizen statement. If anybody else would like to address the board, please fill out a goldenrod form and hand it to our reporting secretary, Lori Johnson. This citizen statement is from Ruth Kantorowicz. The following comments are on the Equity Task Force. 1, the Equity Task Force violated the Open Meetings Act, OMA. The Equity Task Force was established as a board committee, and as such, it is a subject to the Open Meetings Act according to the Board Policy Manual 2:150. However, the Equity Task Force violated OMA from the beginning. There were no public notices of committee's meeting schedule, no agendas were posted, minutes were not available to the public, and the public was not given the opportunity to speak to the committee. 2, as a result of not following the OMA, the task force that was formed was not inclusive and lacked diversity. It had a majority of administrators. There were no representatives of teachers from elementary schools and UMS regular classrooms. Of the 9 parents on the task force, 4 represented Dr. Williams Elementary School, while none represented Thomas Paine, Yankee Ridge, and UECS. Also, of the 9 parents, 4 members belonged to 2 families. B, the opinions of the administrators on the task force overruled the opinions of parents and staff. For example, the administrator from the task force that presented the statement of need at the October 5th BOE meeting said that, minute 26:45 in the video, we really wanted to be inclusive and make sure we were addressing all types of inequalities. However, we also all felt very strongly that racial equity was at the heart of this. Nevertheless, this opinion was not unanimous. Some non-administrators members felt just as strongly that curriculum instruction was at the heart of this, but their opinion got overruled by the majority of administrators. C, the task force did not rely on data in producing the policy draft. The policy states that institutional racism, which benefits people who are white at the exclusion of people of color, is the cause of the disparities in academic performance in our schools. However, the achievement scores and demographics data for our district schools show that the academic disparities are associated with socioeconomic status rather than white student versus students of color statements of the policy draft. In addition, according to the data, if racial comparisons are to be made in this context, we need to replace phrases such as white students versus students of color with Asian and white students versus students of color. D, information from the elementary school teachers was not available to the task force. The teachers would have told the task force that using the district station rotation instruction method, they are already given 3 to 5 times more instruction to the students that are below grade level, while leaving the other students on their own, neglected for hours every week. On top of that, the low performing students are given extra time with special intervention staff. Teachers are frustrated with the unrigorous, low quality curriculum and the ineffective instructional method they are told to use. In addition, the teachers are frustrated with the lack of administrative support in handling disruptive behavior in the classroom. When the teachers are prevented from teaching effectively, all students suffer academically, but the students from families who have resources get help outside of school to keep up with the state standards, thus reinforcing the gap in academic performance. 3, considering the OMA violations and the information mentioned above, the board should not approve the educational equity policy produced by the current task force. 4, I suggest that the board dissolve the current equity task force and start over by assembling a new equity task force and obeying the Meetings Act. Are there, sorry, does anybody else wish to address the board? Okay. So I'd like to call for a motion to approve tonight's agenda as amended.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Any opposed? All right. Accommodations and recognitions. The Illinois Association of School Boards recently recognized our board members Ann Hall as Master Board Member and Brenda Carter for Master Board Member Maintain status. So we have the actual awards here. So here's, yeah, congratulations. Those pictures. And for Brenda.
Thank you.
Thank you. Congratulations. So the designation really confers the fact that they've done a lot of training both at AAA conferences and the regional local conferences and taking classes online. So thank you all for your immense amount of work you put into doing this job. So we are now doing administrative personnel items, 12.4. Angie?
All right, Dr. Levizo, do you want to come up to maybe this area right here so people can see you at the little table? The microphone, I know you haven't been in this space before. It's over here. And I'll go ahead and get started. And so we are bringing human resources and two interview committees are bringing forward a recommendation for hire for the Director of Mentoring and Community Involvement. We had 2 separate committees made up of UEA staff, of community members that were interested. We had students from both Urbana Middle School and Urbana High School serve on a committee where we had a level 1 questions and then level 2 questions at the district office. And Dr. Mia Levizo was the top candidate for both committees. Dr. Mia Levizo is a Chicago native who's lived in the Champaign-Urbana community for over 18 years with her husband and 2 sons. Prior to relocating from Chicago, Dr. Levizo worked over 10 years in the private sector as a database administrator, programmer, and systems analyst. Dr. Levizo's passion for serving children and families compelled her to shift her focus and to pursue a career in public education. She joined Champaign Unit 4 as a school social worker, was promoted to Dean of Students, and is currently working as an assistant principal at Centennial High School. While at Centennial, Dr. Levizo worked tirelessly to support colleagues and students by developing and facilitating social emotional learning, professional development workshops, facilitated restorative circles, assisted with college and career readiness and preparation, served on a school crisis team, and is a special education designee. These are just a few of her amazing contributions. On a personal note, as a former student in her, maybe I shouldn't say student, person who attended professional development on equity that Dr. Levizo presented, I think that she's someone that can bring just several qualities and talents to our district. She holds a bachelor's in management information systems from DePaul University. Dr. Levizo earned both her master's in social work and doctorate in educational policy organizational leadership from the University of Illinois. Mia has an unwavering commitment to ensuring equitable outcomes for students, irrespective of race, gender, socioeconomic status, among many other subgroups. She is dedicated to serving as an equity leader and joining the great work that is in progress at the Urbana 116 school district. And so Human Resources is bringing forward Dr. Levizo to be accepted and welcomed as the Director of Mentoring and Community Involvement beginning November 1st. If approved by the board, we would be very fortunate to have her in Urbana. So,
Board, is there a motion? Is there any discussion?
Are we approving all of 12-4 or just this one?
All 12-4.
Well, the other thing says Carol Baker's retiring effective March 31st, 2021. Is that
Yes.
in the past?
Yes.
Retroactive?
It should be 22.
It says 2021.
It's a misprint. Thank you.
we're not acknowledging Carol retiring because we don't want her to leave. So we're just not talking about that this evening.
I thought that 2021 was how she balanced the budget this year.
I think was it 2023? I think it was 2023.
So, all right. So would amend the motion, please? Okay. Is the second accepted in the amended motion to? All right. Any discussion? All right. Roll call, please.
Member Hassan Atkett,
Yes.
Member Hall,
Yes.
Member Orr,
Yes.
Member Obalski,
Yes.
Member Carter votes yes, Vice President Exum,
Yes.
and President Pulaski.
Yes. Congratulations. Would like to say a few words?
Yes. I do want to say thank you so much. I am really, really honored that I have this opportunity, and I'm looking forward to bringing everything that I have and pouring into this district and continuing some of the amazing things that you guys already are doing. And I'm looking forward to learning and growing with Urbana School District. So I'm very thankful that you guys give me this opportunity. Thank you so much.
Welcome. Congratulations. Okay. Administrative report on the Sola Gratia Farm. It's Tracy Barkley.
Let Carol kind of introduce them. Carol's been working really closely with them, so I'm going to let her introduce them as they come to the presentation table.
Tracy Barkley and Valerie Flores are here this evening to discuss our farm to school planning process that we've all been, several of us on the board and community members have been part of. So we have hard copies as well. Awesome. We can start over here. We'll pass them around.
I'm sorry, I brought 10 copies, so I'm going to short 5 of you, but at the end I'll ask you to receive the first copy.
Yeah, go ahead. That's what I did at the time.
Wow.
Yeah, you've been busy, huh, Tracy? Thank you.
There's a team of us.
Before I start going, what should I be pointing at? Where's the? Okay. Is it good? I was just going to test it. Okay, perfect. All right. Well, thank you for having us. Happy National Farm to School Month, all of October. My name, as Carol said, is Valerie Corris. I'm the Community Nutrition Program Coordinator at Champaign-Urbana Public Health District. And with me is Tracy Barkley, the Director of Sola Gratia Farm. Also on our leadership team for this project are Fiona Monroe from Sola Gratia and Jennifer Lawton from CPHD. And we are here tonight to provide you with an update on the farm to school planning process that we first presented about in February virtually to many of you, some new faces tonight. So we will do a brief review of what the farm to school planning process actually is. So In July of 2020, Sola Gratia and Champaign-Urbana Public Health were jointly awarded a USDA Farm to School Planning Grant. And that grant for the period of July 2020 through June 2021. And that grant supports the activities you see listed on the slide there. One being assessing stakeholder interest and readiness for farm to school components, which are edible school gardens, food and nutrition and agriculture education, and local food procurement for school meals and snacks. The grant also supported piloting specific farm to school activities, which I'll talk about a little bit more in a minute. And the final product of the planning process was to develop a comprehensive farm to school action plan for implementing in the Urbana School District. So when we were here in February, we had actually already completed a lot of the grant activities, especially the ones that are in gray and italicized on the slide. But at that time, we were still working on generating interest in farm to school components and collecting survey responses from the different stakeholder groups, which were teachers, parents, students, local growers and producers. I'm forgetting someone. Food service personnel. So everyone that plays a role in this farm to school process. That has all since been completed. The survey results are detailed in the action plan report that you just received, and they will also be posted on our website, which will be referred to later on in the slides. But just a quick note about the survey results. The data was analyzed by a team of graduate level students at the U of I, and they were led by a professor in the nutrition department at the U of I. So we had a really great team doing data analysis for us. And in general, the survey results just showed that all stakeholders are interested in farm to school activities. There was a 75 to 90% interest in all of the activities that we asked about. The one that showed the least amount of interest was basically directly connecting farmers with the school, but there's a lot of reasons for that. Farmers are busy. It's a lot of work to make that happen. So what we saw the highest interest in was cooking demonstrations, taste tests, field trips to farms and other agriculture facilities, and local food and dining services. As I mentioned before, the final product of this process was developing the Farm to School Action Plan, which is the 55-page report that you all just received, with an accompanying action plan table. It's kind of a shortened version, detailing the goals and strategies for implementing a farm to school program in Urbana School District. I forgot to mention on this last slide here that we, during this time between February and now, we continued meeting with the steering committee to continue generating interest and generating programming, policy, and procedure ideas for the farm to school program, as well as figuring out how to execute pilot activities in now 2 COVID interrupted school years. But we did want to take a minute just to reintroduce the steering committee. The steering committee played a crucial role in establishing the vision and goals for the farm to school program. They also played a major role in informing this action plan. And you can see that the steering committee is composed of a variety of stakeholders, including school district administration and instructional staff, to local farmers, producers, and processors, as well as community organizations and educators. You can see in the bottom right, we have highlighted we're missing some representation from the student body. So getting some more students involved at all grade levels is a goal of ours, as well as getting families involved that are interested in contributing to the success of this program. We will, like I said before, we'll be sharing our contact information towards the end. So hopefully we'll be able to hear from some of these underrepresented groups shortly. As I mentioned, the Farm to School Steering Committee played a big role in establishing this vision statement, and I don't think I would do it justice to summarize it, so I am just going to read it. The Urbana Farm to School Steering Committee envisions a farm to school program that supports students in establishing healthy eating habits, agriculture and food literacy, and a rich personal connection to growing a sustainable food source. Program components will be equitable and support fresh, healthy food access for all Urbana students, promote collaboration between schools, and create connections to community resources such as gardens, farms, food processors, distributors, and farmers markets. On a scope of 5 to 10 years with achievable benchmarks being met every year, success would be defined as adoption of a district-wide culture that supports farm-to-school components as an integral part of the long-term learning environment, locally grown food from school gardens and local farms served to students as part of school meals and snacks, agriculture and nutrition education components integrated into curriculum at all age levels and in dual language programming, as is appropriate for each school's pace of learning. And finally, on-site gardens or growing spaces and kitchens or cooking spaces established at every school, appropriately resourced and used to promote food production, food preparation, and learning. I did just want to reiterate that the steering committee is composed of a lot of school district staff, and so these are their feelings and their words coming out in this vision statement. There are many staff that realized long before this grant came along that farm to school programs can be really impactful for student success and the learning environment. And they're committed to bringing this to a reality. So we were really happy to have all of those school district staff on the steering committee. And now the fun part. Oh, I hope our picture is there. It's not. Pilot activities. The first one that we conducted was in May of this year. That's the picture that you see on the left. We were able to work with the after school program to bring a taste testing event to all of the schools that were hosting after school program at that time. So that was Leal, Thomas Paine, Wiley, Yankee Ridge, and Dr. Williams, I believe. And through that, we had about 200 students participate in this taste testing event. We brought a local cooked kale salad and homemade ranch dressing. Surprisingly, it was a hit. As part of the event, we asked students to tell us if they would eat it again. It was a very brief survey, yes, maybe, or no. And from that, we had I don't remember my numbers, 64 yeses, 48 maybes, and 54 nos. So we'll take 2/3 yes or maybe as a great success. Also with that event, we provided some education about the nutritional benefits of kale, where it was grown, and how everything was made. We brought samples of the different plants that were used in the salad and the dressing for the students to touch and interact with. And it was a really great experience. So we were really lucky to be able to do that, even though the year was interrupted by COVID. And then unfortunately, our picture isn't showing, but we just had our second pilot activity last week. Some of you may have heard about it. We celebrated the Great Apple Crunch. That's an annual nationwide celebration of local apples. We had 40 elementary classrooms participate. So each one of those classrooms received enough apples for all of the students, and as well as an apple related activity. So whether that was a book that the teacher could read, or some classes chose a hands-on science lesson. We had a variety of different activities for them to choose from. And through that, we procured about 800 local apples from a farmer's market and distributed those to the elementary classrooms. I think with both of these activities, we felt like they were a great success. As far as our challenges were concerned, with the taste test event, some of the feedback that we received was related to trying to implement an activity to a mixed age group, and how the content was maybe too advanced for kindergartners, not really in-depth enough for fifth graders. So that's just something for us to keep in mind moving forward when implementing activities like this. With the Great Apple Crunch, I think our biggest challenge was in communication and just getting in touch with the elementary principals and getting their permission for the classrooms to participate in the activity. And then beyond that, disseminating the sign-up form and information about the event. So we think that just improving communication could really make future events like that more successful. So now we will switch gears and focus on what we're really here to present, and that's the Farm to School Action Plan. I mentioned before that it's a 55-page report that most of you now have copies of, and there is a 4-page action plan table that's kind of a condensed version of the full report. We mentioned before that it was informed by the steering committee and the feedback that we received in the survey results. So I will let Tracy take it from here.
Great. So in the interest of time, we're not going to go through the entire report. That's why we sent it ahead of time, and then most of you have hard copies. It's also on our website. The website, for anyone at home maybe interested in going to the website, the links are not quite live. They will be in a day or two, and then everything will be linked between the action plan and the final report. So, so if you look at this next slide, I'm just going to unpack it a little bit so you can understand kind of how we've organized the feedback and the input from the steering committee. We have 4 main goals that came out of the last year's planning process. The first one is school meals and snacks will include locally sourced ingredients that contribute equitably, not only to food security and quality for all students, but also promote long-term healthy lifestyle habits. So from that goal, we have a number of strategies, and I've listed some of them here. An example is to identify, expand, or install certifiable food prep kitchen spaces at each school. So locally sourced and school-grown foods can be processed for student consumption. Another one is making sure we're defining what is local and having that included in the wellness policy. There are then from the strategies a number of action items, which really is our list of like, here's what we're going to accomplish. And from that, we have key players that are involved with each of the action items, and then the timeline, year 1, year 2, year 3, and then evaluation metrics and indicators that will tell us how are we doing when we look back each year. And then finally, the final column is where it will be hyperlinked to the actual section of the report. So you can go back and read, in more depth what we think will need to be done to accomplish each of these action items. So this is the first goal. The second goal is all students will have the opportunities to participate in a sustainable farm to school program that is inclusive of a diverse community. That's something we think is really special about the USD 116 school district is our diversity, and this is a perfect opportunity to celebrate that through different activities, growing different types of food, learning how to prepare different kinds of food. And so there are a number of different strategies, including making sure that everything is ADA accessible, that all of the signage at school gardens is translated into multiple languages, that we're collaborating with district administrators to build food, agriculture, and nutrition education into all the core subject curricula. And then a number of action items are in place. So we'll be working with branding with facilities, and we'll be working with the food and consumer science teachers and surveying the students. What do you like to eat? What do you want to learn how to grow? What do your parents do really well that you'd like to share with others? So there's a number of action items that will come out of this goal as well. I am moving through this fast because I really want to leave some time for questions at the end and also to talk about some more recommendations. So it's all in here. Farm School Action Plan goal number 3 is the school district will foster the growth of a connected, engaged, healthy, thriving community, and will be both mutually supportive and mutually beneficial to all participants in the local food system. So this really has a lot to do with making sure that we are connecting with producers. So we do have some obstacles in place. One, in order for producers to be able to provide locally grown produce in the school system that will have to become GAP certified. That's good agricultural practices. It's not impossible. It's not that difficult, but it will take time and some additional funding. We also need to make sure that field trips are possible. And if not, then we're finding a way to do them virtually in a more creative way. That we have a good communications campaign so the students are engaged and informed about what the learning opportunities are. And so then there's a number of action items with those as well. Farm to school, goal number 4 is we really debated a lot about whether to even have this as a goal because it's kind of key to all 3 of the other goals, but it does require some special care and attention on its own. We need to make sure that anything that we're putting into this program is sustainable, both with time and funding and resources. So we're going to have to make sure that we have a budget and a plan for sustainable funding that's coming from variable resources, that this isn't too much of a burden on teachers and administrators, and that we're being very careful each year to be strategic in just what's happening in year 1, just what's happening in year 2, and that we're building over time so that this isn't a lot of effort up front. It doesn't amount to a lasting program in year 5 and beyond. So next slide just shows you what the report looks like. So this is really for the folks at home, and then also where the links are. We are interested in feedback. Already reading through, I think each time we read through this, we find another thing that we wish we would have included. So I also want to say this is a dynamic document and will need to be over time, that we are constantly revisiting and revising. And it might be that, right now in this planning effort year, that this all sounded great. In year 3, we're thinking either slow down or wow, this is easier than we thought, and we can tackle more to come. So this is as of October 2021 where we're at right now, and then we'll revise and build upon it as we go. So there are a number of recommendations that we wanted to bring to your attention tonight that came out of this planning process. One, Brendan mentioned that this is a lot of work. It was for a team of myself and Valerie and Fiona and Jennifer. We also had a lot of feedback and involvement with members of the steering committee and the district administrators, teachers. So our first recommendation is that for this really to carry on, we really need for there to be someone that is hired by the district who is a full-time farm to school coordinator who knows how to work within the district with all the different parts to make sure that this program is well coordinated, and probably more importantly than anything, that it is equitable and it's also efficient. So I think one thing that we'll be doing as a next step is applying for implementation funds from USDA. That should be up to 3 years of funding. And one of the things that we fully anticipate is for some of that funding to help get a starting position in place for the district. But in the longer term, we'll have to find other funding sources for that to continue. But I think that's going to be necessary. 2, we do have the wellness policy, which I believe is up for triennial assessment soon. And so we've talked to Carol about including some qualitative and quantitative goals for the farm to school program to be written into the wellness policy. So an example would be defining local. What is local? And what percentage local should be our goal for procurement with dining services? So just a few examples. We also think longer term that we should be writing in contractual requirements for the food service providers regarding integration of local produce when it's available. So when you have an option of local apples versus non-local apples, there should be a goal to be supporting locally, and also considering more than just the lowest cost for procurement, because there are additional benefits that will come with that. That I think is a longer term goal. I think when people think of farm to school, often they always go to school lunch first. And honestly, with everything that's in here, that's probably one of the harder, longer term things. So just know that we understand that we're not shooting for that in year 1. A year 1 goal might be the second part of this recommendation, which is shared use of kitchen space for preparation of school garden produce by teachers and students. We have existing school gardens. There will be more hopefully after this next year. We would love to see it for there to be a very clear process for those kitchens to be used by teachers and students to be preparing what they've just pulled out of the garden for their own snack, for example. Adoption of farmer school curriculum standards for every group district-wide. Again, this, is just going to happen in stages. There are already pieces in place. There are so many options out there that could just be adopted as teachers are interested. Creating a garden coordinator position. This is something we've heard a lot about from folks that are already caring for gardens at various elementary schools, for example. In high school, this really has happened because teachers have already been interested and have been passionate about it, but it takes time. Anybody who's planted a garden in April or May and then sees it in July knows, more help is needed. So we heard interest in having part-time garden coordinator positions with compensation be built into this program as well for both maintenance and then also coordination of work days and planting and harvest. And then finally, I'm not sure how much of this is a recommendation for board members, although you'll have lots of ideas because you're already engaged throughout the district. But we really think that we'll need, for this program to be sustainable and strong, we'll need increased student, family, and neighborhood engagement, really throughout this whole program, but specifically to maintain the gardens. And I think there's a lot of potential partnerships, whether it's through internships or summer school programs or through family engagement coordinator, it might be PTA, additional signage. It's a really neat way to bridge between neighborhoods and schools and families in those non-school months. So with that, we do have some next steps that we'll be working on. We do intend to continue working with the steering committee over the next year to maintain engagement, moving up to implementation. We'll be focusing a lot on edible grow spaces. We think we'll be able to do a few more Harvest of the Month activities. Maybe there'll be field trip opportunities. I know there will be with Solgradia and probably some other locations as well. We'll continue monthly meetings with Carol until we lose her next spring. But we'll be working with Carol on the wellness policy, informing the wellness policy, also hopefully reestablishing the committee that's involved with the wellness policy and also mini planning. And then work through the transition from you to your replacements so that farmer school, there isn't a loss in movement on this effort. And then, as we mentioned, we did get a grant for the edible growth space through USDA. That's for the next year. So we'll be inventorying what already exists, what teachers, families, students want to exist in terms of edible growth spaces, so the schools that don't already have gardens. And then hopefully we'll be building and installing some more next spring. And then we'll be applying for implementation funds this winter. We'll see when USDA puts the RFP out. But with that, I'd like to entertain any questions.
Board members, any questions?
I would just like to say a huge thank you. I mean, everyone here was for this, and I feel like you and your team have really taken off and ran with this, Tracy. So I know a lot of work has went into this whole program, and I'm very happy to see it growing. So thank you.
Yeah, equally ecstatic about local foods and the program. I guess I think a question in the long range planning is just thinking about, I noticed and being part of the steering committee, getting feedback and survey results seem to be incredibly challenging. Mm-hmm. So how, I guess, trying to think of how we could, as a board, be more supportive, or what are some things you and your team have thought about for the next round of survey, and just feeling like that it's, getting the information that you want and getting it to the people that you really want to hear from, which is like the biggest challenge of any survey.
COVID didn't help.
Right. So I guess I was just thinking, I'm assuming that's a huge part of like how you communicate the successes and the needs of kind of the program and moving forward. So I was just curious what, I don't know, some thoughts on future surveys or I don't know, needs in that regard?
So I will say we've been very tempered because of COVID and just knowing there's so much happening right now. And we've tried to do as much as we can without asking too much and without pushing too hard. I think it'll be a lot easier. Like, for example, the Great Apple Crunch, to have someone internal pushing that forward and getting principals' attention, for example, to then distribute to teachers, because I think the way we designed it, it was actually not an extra effort for teachers. It was actually one of the teachers we talked to used our lesson plans 2 days, and it was like a very big help, and kids were excited about it. It was fun. But I think for us, we're always weighing, like, are we asking too much, or how do we get this in front of them? And so it's having an internal push, or put it as not a priority, because it's not necessarily a priority given everything else that's happening right now, but some more supported way to push things out would be helpful. Also, I think, with us focused on the edible grow spaces this next year, that is done, in physical form, present, it's visible. I think that'll be easier to get attention the more we put signage out. I think that's going to draw some more attention in. COVID's been hard, and I know we all get a lot of surveys, but the more we can be physically present in attention getting ways, I think we'll start getting these positive feedback loops in place.
Any other questions?
I was just going to say thanks. I'm delighted that this was at tonight's meeting. When I read it on the agenda, I was like, oh, yay, we get to hear background, because I can't believe it's been a whole year since we heard from you, but that really lit a fire. And I wanted to see this in our district since my kids were little, and was hoping and praying that we could bring something about. So please keep us posted regularly, and please come to us and tell us what you need and how we can help, because I think, like Laura said, I think everybody wants to help and see it succeed. And it's over the years, if we can get the funding and the buy-in from everybody, we can make this a really deeply rooted program that's just part of Urbana. And we can be not to sound all wifty-wafty about it, but I want us to be like a beacon for other people around the area to say it's possible. this is something that can happen, and it's got benefits for everybody. So thank you. I love it.
To that end, well, first of all, thank you for this wonderful presentation. And I think we could hire some of you as program managers at where I work, because it's incredibly detailed. But going back to getting student buy-in, to getting parent surveys, and maybe summer workers, I was wondering if perhaps we could have some sort of an event at maybe the spring parent-teacher conferences, where you could solicit the captive audience, as it were, as when parents come in. Hopefully COVID will down in the spring as well. You might have better turnout for that. Just a thought. But again, thank you very, very much.
I wanted to say thanks again and let you know my garden is still growing.
Yeah.
We expanded it this year. So we've got lots of lettuce and kale added to the mix, and some peppers. And like I said the last time, this was started from a seed that you guys planted and Dan doing at the high school. And thanks again. It's great to just go out and pick right from your garden and right to the table. So
yeah, and I think the movement of the high school garden to the corner where it is right now has been amazing.
I like that space.
A couple times that I've been out there, Dan's had a number of his students and classes out there, and it looks great. It's very visible, and every time I've been out there, people have stopped to talk. So it's like passersby are taking notice. We don't have signs out there yet, but there's such an awesome opportunity to keep building on that. And I think that's where we can get past some of these, the survey obstacles. I think we can just start creating a buzz, and the more we get students involved, which is where the teachers come in, with taking the classes out there and helping them have this, fun, healthy experience, is just going to keep, I think, building on itself. So
it's growing really well out there too.
Yeah.
So I want to thank, I know I'm not a board member, but I want to thank you guys too, Tracy and Valerie. I agree with Paul. When we get to the point doing some strategic planning work in our equity implementation, this is like a great model. I love it. So Thank you. I'm hoping you guys are going to be part of that process when we get there too. I also wanted to say I happened to be at Thomas Paine. They were part of the Great Apple Crunch on Thursday. The City Schools Foundation Board, we had our meeting there. So Kelly Hill and I got to explain to the whole board about the Great Apple Crunch because there were lots of apples in the library and everyone took an apple home. So it was really fun. But yeah, I just wanted to thank you for your hard work on this. I do have one question. This is more so for Carol. I know Carol is so excited to hear you guys talking about the wellness policy. I just kind of have to say that. but that's not what my question was. My question is about the kitchens. So I know for many, many years, we've been told by, and I'm glad you have a CPhD person on your committee, because we've been told for years that we couldn't be in the kitchens because of the health sanitation rules. So that one goal about, sharing the kitchen for prep and things like that. Did you guys talk about that, or is that something?
I wasn't on that piece of the committee, but I know when we've used for like Thanksgiving and different things, when we have people in the kitchens, we just have to know about it, and we have to have a food service person there because they need to know what areas they have access so they can all be cleaned before the next day. They just have to be properly sanitized. So it's not that they can't use it, it's just that we have to have supervision there to make sure that everything is cleaned. And
I know that's something our administrators will ask because, often they're, that helps.
They've used the kitchens before, but again, we always have to have somebody there to supervise. So.
Thank you again for your help.
Thank you.
Thank you. Brian?
Yeah. Can I ask just one question? It got me thinking when you were talking about buy-in. And obviously I wasn't here for the first presentation. This is amazing, awesome work. When I'm thinking about buy-in, I was looking a little bit at the survey results, and it's clear that the board is pretty excited about it. The students, the staff are excited about it. And then you look at the farmers and it's a little bit more dicey. Do you have any sense of what's holding them back from getting excited? Is it about obstacles, money? What's going on there?
Okay, so that's an excellent question. I am director of a not-for-profit farm, and one of our goals is to address food insecurity, which is why we're involved in this process to begin with, and we care a lot about creating healthy connections with people in general, and kids and food. That said, because I'm running a not-for-profit farm, we can do things that other farms can't. And so, to be totally honest, growers will have to have some additional incentives to be involved in something like this, because growers are not going to necessarily get top price from an institution, right? They also have trouble providing produce for as long as a food service provider might want them to, right? Like, we have a very seasonal operation, and so providing carrots or enough carrots for a long period of time is difficult. And then the other piece is the GAP certification is a yearly certification that comes with a fee and not necessarily additional work. Like, I think most of the growers that we would want to be partnering with through this program are already following good food safety practices, are following good agriculture practices, but there's a certain amount of work that comes with like the paperwork and certification and the third-party audit. So this is going to be a lift for the farmers because it's already really hard to make a living. The return on investment is difficult. So I think for like our farm, Sola, sustainable student farm on campus, Hendrick House Farm, we are 3 not-for-profit farms that I think can be working on getting some of the pieces in place to then figure out how to get the economics right for other growers to then partner in a farm to school program. And it might be that, one producer is just on for apples and one producer is on for carrots and one producer is on for head lettuce, and they can make it work in that way. Or they just see that this is of value because of their feeding their community. But that's where, like, at first blush, when you start surveying farmers, they're like, oh my gosh, like we're barely making it as it is. And it's same thing with like field trips. You start talking about field trips, and some growers, it's hard to have insurance in place to have schools visit, for example, or to take the time. So I think, like with so many things, you have to work with like who's willing to and interested in working to begin with, to then work out the kinks to open the doors for others later. that answer your question?
Any other questions? All right, well, thank you very, very much.
Thanks, everyone.
Our policy review section is next, section 8.1, the educational equity policy. Dr. Avery Tatum.
Okay. So I know we have while Tracy and Valerie are kind of switching out, I know we have a couple of equity task force people in the audience. If you want to move closer, you can. You don't have to sit back there. And I think Dr. Kathy might be in a Zoom. Is he still in the Zoom? He wasn't able to join in person, so he's joining us via Zoom tonight. So I know I shared with board members just late this afternoon, and you have a paper copy. We have been able to get the draft policy out in the last 2 weeks. It's been shared on our website. It has been shared via superintendent updates. I think 2 different ones. We put out an email and asked for public comment. Catherine had it in the board update that's been on the website. So we have heard from one parent who has made some suggestions, and I've shared those suggestions with the committee. The board made a couple of suggestions at our last meeting that we've also incorporated. So I'm going to walk through really quickly just a few of the changes. So you guys have it electronically as well as on paper, but I'm going to walk through it for the public. So there was a lot of discussion, not a lot, all of our discussions took place via our committee via email. Our next meeting is scheduled for Thursday, so we didn't have the opportunity to have we meet via Zoom, so we didn't have the opportunity to have a Zoom meeting. So I've just been collecting feedback. We have a draft that we kind of work on. Anybody who knows how Google Doc is, people make comments and suggestions via the Google Doc, or people have emailed Dr. Kathy and I individually, or email myself, and I've been kind of collecting all of that in one document. So some of the conversation from one of our public comments was having more discussion about the racial equity piece, and also bringing in more information about low income and income as one of our disparities. So we added socioeconomic disparities in our statement of need, just the statement about it. We already had low income and income in our descriptors via the commitment. So those are already there. One of our board members, one of our committee members also took a stab at kind of rewriting our statement of need and she's here tonight. She shared some of her thoughts in response to our public comment that we received, and we added a sentence from the equity mission statement to the policy. We are a community devoted to dismantling inequitable practices so that all students reach their personal greatness. So that is a sentence that we added. Dr. Kathy shared at our last meeting about our 1998 equity draft. So we wanted to make sure that was reflected. And then we kind of tweaked a sentence based on our public comment from our parent, as well as one of our committee members. And we changed one sentence in our statement of need to say previous efforts to address inequities between white students and students of color have historically been largely unsuccessful. And that is reference to our previous equity audit that was done in 1998. And then we added another sentence. This policy will ensure that efforts continue to achieve educational equity for all USD 116 students. One of the questions I think that came up and that I was able to collect feedback from our committee was there was some question about, is this a racial equity policy or an educational equity policy? And I feel like the consensus of our group is that we really can't talk about educational equity without talking about race, especially in our district, because as we've seen in our affirmations, while those affirmations don't include data for every single point, we added these affirmations because we know them to be true, that our white students and maybe a small percentage of our, the small group of our Asian families do outperform our Black, Indigenous students of color in all of these areas. So it was the consensus of the group that we, based on the feedback we received from our public comment to our parents, that we were not going to change our affirmations and that we wanted to stick with the declarations and keep them as they were listed in the draft. That is the feedback, the consensus of our group. While we do have, we had a lot of spirited conversations about this while we were working on the policy. It was the consensus of the group at the time, and it continues to be the consensus of the group that we know that these conversations are difficult, especially when we're talking about race, and people are uncomfortable when you start talking about white students outperforming our Black and our Hispanic and our bilingual emergent students and our newcomers who are new to the country and all the other students of color. But just because it's uncomfortable, it doesn't mean that we need to water down what we're doing and not just call it out and be honest about it. And I think that we felt as a committee when we drafted this to begin with, and it's the consensus of several people, the majority of our group, that this continues to be what we want to stand behind as a group, that these are our affirmations and that we don't want to take the racial comments out. As I mentioned in our previous discussion about this policy, this is a living, breathing, working document, right? We don't want you guys to approve it and then it sits in a binder, we add it to our website and we never look at it again. We understand that there's not data attributed to all of these, but honestly, because of COVID, we don't have the data that we would want to put to every single one of these bullets. And we don't feel that it's a true reflection of our students and our work and our efforts to come to put data to a couple of these bullets and not to all of them. Incorporating data is what is going to happen in the next phase of our work. The equity assessment audit is a huge qualitative, quantitative lift. We'll be looking at all the data points, right? Like we shared with the 5 labs coming. We are fingers crossed we'll be getting closer to that in the next week or so. But again, we feel that putting data to a few of these, and I completely agree. We had a lot of conversations about not including these affirmations without data or with data. But the consensus of the group was it's more important that we put these statements and these affirmations out into the space so we can get this kind of feedback from our administrators, our teachers, our parents, our students moving forward as we begin to share the policy in other spaces. Let me see what else did. I pointed out, we added, Board Member Hall made a suggestion about including housing status. So we included that, housing status and or housing security as one of our groups that this policy is really focusing on. We also added a definition for systemic racism. While systemic racism and institutional racism are often very closely linked or, kind of used interchangeably. We felt that it was important to still have them both listed. And in the opportunity gap section of the policy, we originally only had race and or ethnicity listed, that we want to make sure we are providing an equal distribution of educational resources on the basis of race, ethnicity, and we also added class, special education status, and or disability. So those are the tweaks that we've made in the last 2 weeks based on comment from a parent, feedback, and some rewrites from one of our task force members, as well as the feedback that task force members gave via our document. So questions, comments?
public comment. So I think to some degree, I get the impression that maybe approval of this might be being rushed a bit, in that, we didn't hear anything, unless you're on the committee, about this till 2 weeks ago. And then there was word that we're going to get all the input from the PTAs of the different schools, parents, students, and that the 2 week ago meeting question about student input was, we may not have time to get that in the next 2 weeks. I'm on 2 different PTAs email lists, and I haven't heard from either of those groups.
Oh, I wasn't, and I'm sorry, Robbie, you misunderstood. My intent was not to try to do that in the next 2 weeks. I would like the board to give us permission to move forward with taking this. We didn't want to take this policy any further than this point until you guys gave us the approval to do so. So I've not shared it in any of those spaces yet. I haven't even shared it beyond our group. This is the only space. So we haven't even taken it to our administrative cabinet yet, because I want the board to say, yes, this is a great starting point, and we want you to take this out now and get. So no, that has not happened. You're absolutely right.
Yeah, that's so when you're talking about parent input, we're talking about single parent input.
Yeah, that's the only person who.
Because it hasn't really been publicized. So the question that we are to approve this and then get all the input and then change it as we go, or should we work on it a little harder, get some more input, and maybe approve it in a month or 2?
Well, the idea was to have it proved so we're ready to move forward on our task force with our work. So if, we're able to keep it open and people can continue to give us feedback if they like to, I'm happy to take it out in other spaces. Once the board has said, yes, we feel like it is in a good spot, it is in a good place where we can now take it out, and we want to back it and get some more support for it. So
is there some clause or bylaw somewhere that says you cannot move on working on action items while waiting to approve this?
No, I think I was trying to respect the board to bring it here first before I let all these other outside groups have access to it before the board did. So my process was to bring it here first, get your input, and then we can take it out in other spaces. So.
All right. Well, my personal feeling is we should have input from everybody else before we approve it.
Board members, is there basically a straw poll on this basic question? Do you wish to move forward with planning for the audit without an approved policy, or do you wish to approve the policy and then amend it if there's feedback or data found in the audit to change things?
Well, one question I think is, so we have appointed a board committee which was made up of some number of parents and other stakeholders. So procedurally, I think that's where the question at hand is. We did get parent input, but it was parents who were on the committee. And in some ways, the public comment was not completely representative of who the parents were who were on the committee and things of that nature. So I think that's more the question is, at what level of approval do we feel we need to give at this point, as opposed to we appointed a committee that was representative of most of the stakeholders, no students. So that is still a question that remains, but parents who were on that committee did provide their comments at that point in time. Are we comfortable with that level of input from parents?
Well, judging on other subcommittees that we've had, like facilities and things like that, I mean, we get proposals brought to us from those committees. I'm viewing this as the same type of committee, and so I'm just going on precedent that when we have like a building plan for Thomas Paine or Yankee Ridge or whatever, that subcommittee's been talking about it, in their own space for a long time, and then they bring that to us. So am I wrong in assuming that we're viewing this the same sort of way? I mean, we haven't adopted a final policy on anything because we're still working. This is just leading us where to direct our efforts in the coming year with an equity audit, but it's not cemented into stone anything substantial that we're going to use moving forward with our curriculum and our strategic planning, right?
Yes,
So
absolutely. Thomas Paine is a great example. So we brought the Thomas Paine project here, I don't know, at least 2 or 3 times. And then we actually went over to Thomas Paine and had an engagement activity with families. Low participation at that event, but it was an opportunity to have some input into the plan. But that was after it had been taken and vetted through the first level with the board. So that is a good example. Yeah.
okay, I mean, and I just bring it to because people, you know, like Ravi or Brian or Laura who haven't been on subcommittees to do work, I want to make sure that in my own mind, I'm understanding it in the same context so that it's not its own animal. It's kind of fits under the same category as the other subcommittees that we've done work with. So, I mean, I see where you've landed on the stopping point you have. You want to, you know, we've read it now several times and we've seen it and seen the amendments and everything, and it feels like a comfortable spot to now take it into the wider public. But so that's, I mean,
So in other words, it's approving it for the next phase.
It's not approving it.
Take us to the next phase. And we know that we will have to come back to, like, even the committee was very strong in their voice around the bullets in our statement, that once we complete our audit, our goal is to come back and really put real numbers to these bullets. But right now, we just don't have that data to do it well. So we didn't want to not do it well. And we need to go through the full audit process in order to be able to come back to this document and strengthen it. So.
Well, based on that too, and especially with what we heard at the last meeting, Dr. Kathy and everybody saying it's going to be a lengthy process to get this equity audit done properly, like at least a year. So I'm all for, like, let's go, you know, everything's, the gears are going already. So I want to keep it going, but if that helps move that along, then I'm in favor of it.
Okay. Yeah, I just had a quick question. Would you be able to, do you remember exactly how many parents were on that committee?
Oh.
Because I know there were staff members, I know there was parents, and then am I correct in saying that the principals
Not
asked
every
the
principal.
parents
Oh,
who
no.
wanted to be on that committee, or how did parents
No, we
find out about getting on it?
Yeah, we had an application process. So people had to actually fill out an actual application and apply. And then there was a committee that kind of, anonymous. We didn't have names. They just had people's applications and their essay responses and their survey responses, and those were rated. So we actually had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 parents. And they did represent Dr. Williams, UMS, UHS, Wiley, Leo, Thomas Paine, King. I do not believe we had a UECS parent, but I'm not sure if that might be correct. But from what I'm looking at this, I don't see a UECS parent listed.
Did you have any parents from Wiley at all?
Yes, we did.
Okay.
At the time, the parent was from Wiley, and that parent is now in a different building. But while we were doing the majority of this work, that parent was a Wiley parent.
2 of those parents, or sets of those parents, have the same last name, the same schools. So, like, as a public comment person speculated that they were potentially husband-wife. Is that true?
That is true.
Yeah, that's just a sign that there wasn't a very diverse group. If you've got
So we
husband
opened
and
up
wife
the
times 2.
application. We opened up the application process twice. The first time we opened up the application, we had 0. We only had white parents apply. We had not one African American or Latino parent go through the process. So we opened it up again because we can't have an equity committee with a group of white people writing the policy. So we reopened it, and we reached out wider and said, please encourage our folks to apply for this. And we had some people who did.
I guess I wanted to just talk further on maybe some of the language. I think like policy in and of itself feels very formal and very like permanent and very, I guess, heavy. And so I feel like leaving in the idea that it's a draft, as far as like that can't leave,
sure,
the title of what it is we're voting on, I guess, and that it's not, fully
Final.
implemented and like, I think that draft word, I guess, is what I was getting to, is that is
Sure.
really important. And I also feel like perhaps voting now would be nice to have some sense of what are the next check-ins for, like, you know, I know it's not next week we're going to get student feedback, but like, what are those check-ins? So collectively we're understanding that, like, you know, I don't think it's going to fall by the wayside, but I think it's really important to like be very definitive in saying, you know, by this point, we're going to bring, I don't know, this to all the PTAs. And by this point, we're going to solicit I don't know, 150 students.
Yep.
By this point. So I guess I feel like trying to respect and understand that, like, not, you know, inevitably people are going to feel left out, that they didn't know and they didn't get to participate. We have a pretty large district and there's various forms of communication, and we know that not everybody is reached. How do we still allow for feedback and facilitation of those ideas that now we're just hearing about it in a respectful manner, I guess?
Sure. So after I get a sense from the board that we're able to, the draft is not going to go away. So even the policies that we bring you guys from press, right? It might have one date and then it'll have revised and then it'll have revised. I mean, we can revise a policy as many times as we want to, or we can update it. But so just hopefully we're able to move forward to take this into wider spaces. So my administrators will see it for the first time on Thursday, hopefully at administrative cabinet. We've not shared it with all the principals. There were some principals on the committee, but again, I've asked people until we were ready to open it up to the public to really not do that out of respect for the board. So I'll go to some PTA meetings, and as we've already mentioned here, the equity audit is going to take at least a year. So we will be coming back to this policy multiple times, probably throughout the year. But we won't have data and we won't be able to finalize it until that audit is done. So we've got the whole rest of the school year to get as much engagement as we can possibly get, whether it's from focus groups. We're going to be doing some focus groups through the equity audit process. So that's a great opportunity while we have those focus groups. There'll be parent focus groups, student focus groups, staff member focus groups, to also put the policy in front of those folks. But yeah, so we'll have a lot of spaces where we can, I mean, and like you said, we put it out there a lot, but it is all, you know how that is. We're reaching kind of the same group through the updates and through emails, and you know, it is having people who will go to the website. And right now we haven't had a lot of people kind of clamoring to offer suggestions, but that could change in the next few months as we get it out into some different spaces. But the word draft is not going away. If it makes you feel better, we could like watermark it behind there. I'm okay with that too. Absolutely. Sure. Yeah.
No, I agree that draft word should be in there because, you know, one of the questions from the parent comment on the email was about whether this was the final document, or because I commented to her that it's a working document
Yes,
that will
absolutely.
be modified as time rolls on. But along those lines, you know, as data is obtained, this whole thing may be completely turned upside down from what it is right now. You know, and to some degree to say we don't have data because of COVID doesn't make sense to me, frankly, because Urbana School District's been around since like 1920 or something. I mean, we had somebody have a FOIA request from some board meeting in 1930 last week or something, right? So systemic racism did not just start a year ago. You know, it's been around since like 1600. The entire civilization in which we live in is based off of that. And so the goal, I think, of providing equity in education is trying to figure out how we can work within that system. You know, you can't necessarily change all of our civilization. You know, you'd have to, like, our neighborhoods are redlined for where people live. You know, you'd have to really jumble up everybody and move them to different houses. It'd be very complex. but we have to figure out how to make it so everybody could, watch that baseball game without the fence, right?
Sure.
So I think having it say draft is important for us to agree to move on. And I think it's also important that we have data. Any of the data could be from 2018, 2017, because you just can't go on what's going on in these first 2 months of school and then base a whole policy off of it.
Yes, I agree. I think Laura and Ravi made some very good points. I believe that draft should be in here. And a lot of our documents that we already have currently, they are working documents, which means that we can easily, just like Dr. Ivory Tatum said, oftentimes we have to go back and revise a policy and things like that. But I do see the word draft here, and it's just like at the very back, though, draft 10/18/21. So
It's at the top. And
Oh,
draft
yeah.
was
Sorry,
intended to
sorry.
stay.
I was just-
we're
yeah.
going to take it away.
I'm tired. Sorry. Yeah.
Okay.
All right, any further comments, questions? All right, so this is part of our consent agenda later this evening. Thank you.
Thank you.
11.0 is our discussion, or 11.1 is our discussion on a school board subdistrict redistricting. So this is that time of the decade again. We've gotten the census data to redraw our election boundaries, which is going to be required prior to next year's school board elections. We looked it up and we approved the maps last time around. I think the first meeting in December of 2011. The process at that time was we had a set of 7 criteria that we used to try to figure out what we valued in drawing these boundaries. Some of them are determined by federal election law. They have to be contiguous, et cetera. We wanted to draw as many minority districts as possible. We wanted to have things set up so that basically every school board sub-district represented 2 different schools in the elementary attendance areas. There were 7 items. Was that included in the email?
Yeah, I was good. It was included in your packet, but
I don't have it on me. Sorry, I don't have it on me. So really, anyway, the purpose of this portion of our agenda tonight is to initiate a discussion on process and on the criteria that we as a board want to use to kind of evaluate different maps. The process we followed last time around was we actually had a board meeting held over at the Brookins, and we had a consultant basically live move lines on a map and adjust accounts, and until we can get the 7 sub-districts in relative alignment with regards to the population. That's probably not necessary anymore, and well, we don't have an entity who's willing to do that with regards to our current budget. So we've been talking to people at the county who have assisted the county board in this, and the census data is uploaded into a freely available website called Dave's Redistricting, and that's what other entities have done for the county board, so that people could submit their own maps. So we're actually going to be talking with people from the county again later this week to help us take our existing sub-district boundaries and put them into that system so that we can evaluate how far off we are from with the population shifting. Are our boundaries okay right now, or are they completely out of whack with regards to population?
John, I just sent you the criteria. Okay, thanks.
Okay, thank you. And then, basically, board members can then and members of the public can submit potential maps, and then we will have an evaluation of them at future agendas probably before the end of the year to select a set of basically a map to redraw our election boundaries. Oh yeah, here we go. The last time around they were substantially equal in proportion to the 2020 census. They were contiguous, they were compact, which means that they're not obviously gerrymandered. They maintain proper minority balance with compliance with the Voters' Rights Act. Something else we tried to do was to align them as much as possible to precinct boundaries so that the county clerk doesn't happen to make a million different ballots for every precinct. But that might be unavoidable. And then we wanted to have an equitable distribution of Illinois UI students. That was something that the prior board valued. And then we wanted to be representatives attached to existing elementary attendance areas. So, does this set of criteria look good to this board? It's something to think about anyway. Comments, questions? Go ahead, Robbie.
Well, I think following up on the prior conversation about equity, that's probably the most key thing, so that there's representation for underrepresented people on this board.
Absolutely.
And so to some degree, I'd say to all degree, I would take that over having 2 elementary schools in each district.
Yeah, I agree.
So that's how previously I talked to you about doing something that sounds like it's illegal and we cannot do that's what the lawyer had said, I believe. I was talking about, maybe for everybody here, I was talking about having like 3 or so sub-districts in the underrepresented areas, so they're guaranteed a representative, and then having the other 4 seats be at large.
Oh, I see. No, yes, yeah, it's a state election law. Yeah,
in order to change that.
So we changed over to from completely at large to 7 individual sub-districts back in 99. And to change away from that would require another referendum, and each and every sub-district would have to approve a change. So he'd have all 7 districts have to be over 50% for whatever change we proposed and how to do it.
Wow.
No, I agree with you. I think that would be.
That hybrid nice thing, balance. I think, would be the easier way, and you could look on demographics to try to figure it out. So, that's why I promote. The majority minority groups kind of look towards that, but.
Our last map at the time had 1 sub-district that was majority minority and another that was close. But I have no idea what they are right now, how things have balanced out over the last decade.
I know in my sub-district, I have students who go to every single school in Urbana. It's not just one set grade school. Wow. And I also have all the mobile home parks in my sub-district also.
Oh, and sub-district 5, which is where I represent, is basically the Leo school district with a little tongue that goes out to Wiley. Right. So I don't know what's going on in Wiley. I don't know anybody that lives in a little tongue that goes out to Wiley, nor have I ever talked to anybody from that district, that area. So, my sub-district is really voted by the Leo parents.
Yep.
So, just as an example, and actually in my WUNA district, the West Urbana Neighborhood Association, you could have 3 people living between Florida Avenue and Illinois that are all on the board.
Right.
Me, you, and Ann could all be from even 10 blocks.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think it sounds like it was worse prior to that. It used to be like 5 wheel parents on the board, but you can easily have 3, and I think that's still unequitable.
So that was one of the changes we made 10 years ago, was that the prior boundary was from for your sub-district was from Pennsylvania on up.
Yeah.
But because of the population growth in southeast Urbana with Myra Ridge, et cetera, the shifting caused that to happen. But we certainly could look at redrawing things back the way they were and making other kinds of adjustments. That's one complaint I've gotten over the years several times from Wiley parents in particular was they're essentially located and they felt that they were carved up and don't have a real representative on this board. Mm-hmm. And I think there's some validity to that.
Mm-hmm. So my question, I think, also relates to our last conversation is, I'm not sure in the past how information has been collected from families and constituents and public and community members, but we know we're going to have to work hard to get the representation and the voices we want. So if we are, I mean, this will be coming quick. And I don't know what we've done in the past. I mean, as far as trying to get that information. So being proactive and thinking now, like what can we be sharing? What can we be asking? And how, I mean, we have parent teacher conferences coming up. We have, what are these opportunities where we have more like touch points with families that we do want their input.
Well, so on Friday, we're meeting with the county to basically learn how the process will. Basically, anybody could draw a map. So I think it would be useful. And I hate to throw John under the bus here, but it'd be nice if we as a district could not only have like a web page that shows constituents on how to do this, but maybe even like a YouTube video where we could walk through. How to use the website, et cetera.
Yeah, that's completely within the realm of possibility. We can get that set up real quick.
And the county was a really good example. I mean, I've spent a lot of, we've been working with the county planners, and they had a separate redistricting link on the website. And with this new app that they're using, where all the census data is already there, anybody can go in. And I mean, there were several different versions of just, I can go in and create an equity map and say, hey, county, this is how I think you guys should redraw your lines. So we'll definitely want to give people, and we've been playing around with the app a little bit, and it isn't, terribly difficult to use. So I think what Paul's suggesting, having a YouTube video or just some screenshots that we can put out where people can just step by step kind of figure out how to do it, and they can share their versions of the map with us too. I agree.
Yeah. And we're going to have some sort of process in place, I think, to evaluate maps that are coming in, and then the board's going to have to, in a very, very, very open fashion, I guess, distill all those submitted maps down to the candidates that we'll end up voting on. We'll probably doing this over a set of several meetings.
And our goal would be to have it done by the end of this, by the end of December timeline. I don't know if that's feasible or possible, but if we don't make that, we don't make that. But we want to do it right.
Yeah. So
I think too, it's going to be a good opportunity for us to just provide information to the public about all of this whole process, because it's really confusing to know the difference between a sub-district and a school neighborhood and attendance area. And then even more so, because my district is very heavy with U of I students who don't see themselves as engaged partners when they vote locally at all. And what, that I don't know if there are any student political groups with the U of I. I mean, they may not have kids. They're not old enough necessarily to have children in the district, but they are voters and they are taxpayers when they're registered in Champaign County. So I like getting input from them. I mean, it might be kind of tough to get equal representation across U of I students. I mean, we've got a lot of new builds that are happening towards the north, in University Avenue and that kind of thing. But there's so many heavy, and you guys, I'm trying to think who in my neighborhood. Ravi, I don't know if you have many in your district, but historically I've had to hit the doors of a lot of people from the U of I who don't know anything about us. So, I mean, they don't necessarily represent a huge electorate in town, but it's nice to know if they can be informed about this process too.
I mean, what we're balancing here in the 7 sub-districts is not voters or registered voters. What we're balancing is
representation,
people.
And people.
Just, and so all the people who are living in FAR or PAR count, right? So that's part of why there's so many sub-districts on the west side of town, is we've got a high density number of people there, many of whom don't vote, but they still count. So that's why we have all those sub-districts on the west side of town.
So one question is about the 7 criteria, being that I and several others were not present at that point in time. I'm wondering if anyone can sort of walk us through how we came to these 7 and whether we need to continue to use those. I mean, one big issue is this issue of voter, who actually votes versus population. I know we need to use census data, but that creates a huge problem in terms of what the problem we're actually trying to solve in a way is conflated with the fact that we cannot necessarily ensure people are going to be voting. So walk us through a little bit.
Well, no, thanks. Well, the first three are basically federal election law. The fourth one is the Voters' Rights Act, which is also federal election law. And then the last three, I think, were just the pleasure of the board at that time.
Don, can you put them back up?
So for the public, it's substantially equal population. That's an absolute requirement. Contiguous, you can't have two unconnected subdistricts. Areas be with subdistrict. Compact is basically don't gerrymander. That's just a goal. Obviously, it's not a requirement. And then Voter Rights Act is basically we want to construct minority districts to encourage minority representation on this board. But I think you run the risk though of if you put basically the red line districts of the entire African American community in one district, you're only allowing the opportunity for one of these seats to be held by a minority as well. So you get that cuts both ways, right? I think the last time around, so that was partially due to the method that we were using to draw the map in a live meeting. It would have taken forever for us to blow the map up and draw it from scratch. We took the prior map and just tweaked it basically to make it comply with relatively balanced.
That's the minimal disruption
piece.
So that's the one I have just slight issues with when we're talking, for example, about this idea of Wiley being chopped up into different ways. To me, if we ended up gluing that all back together, that may be a more than minimal disruption. And so that's the one that's kind of like, what is that really a priority of ours?
It's not mine. I would love to see that scratched actually, but that's my personal preference. Yeah. I don't think we need to pay it. Last time around we had 7 board members. We drew the map and all 7 board members are still separated, right? So that might not happen this time around.
Now, when I read minimal disruption, what I read is individual board members looking to maintain their seat. So I think it's something that, at least I will say, I don't care where my house is on the map. We just need to do it the right way. Okay. So I don't know. I think it would be a voluntary statement for everybody else to make that statement, but I will totally make that. And so I think equity is the thing here.
Yeah, I concur.
And when you're talking about the county board, every other political position, there's like how many Democrats and Republicans that will vote regularly live in your district. And that's what they look at when they're drawing those lines. And we don't have political affiliations on this board. So it's not, I wouldn't even say it's who are the voters, it's just who lives there.
You're right.
Who's going, whatever, who's paying property taxes, who has kids in school, whatever, I don't know, but it's you're just representing the people.
And we'll look at those maps also demographically too. Like we'll be able to pull.
That's part of the website. You can see the percent.
Yeah, that's what you need when you're comparing one map to the other. Is what is the demographics of each location? Age, ethnicity, all that.
The website breaks that down for you as you add block by block to a different portion of the map.
The tricky part for us this time around is we were actually working with GIS people. So while we were in our meeting, we were able to say, well, let's move this block here, and we could pick the block up and move it. And we could see how that impacted, that particular block. We don't have the luxury to do that this time. So John is going to be, we don't have the luxury this time to work with the GIS people. They're going to train us so we can try to do some of that manipulating ourselves. And John's going to get the raw data too. So
and once we have the tabular data, we can kind of move things, and we can even do some things algorithmically with the criteria to give some sample maps.
Yeah. we kind of meandered away from your initial question, which was the justification for these 7 last time around, but stopping at the minimal disruption, is there any real, I guess, a disagreement from anyone on the board to removing that this time around? Excellent. Minimal disruption of existing boundaries. Okay, great. So the equitable distribution of U of I students, that's what I was getting at with regards to basically the proliferation of subdistricts on the west side of town. We kind of try to strike a balance between not having gerrymandering while also having as many subdistricts as possible reach in and grab dorms to kind of minimize that effect. And then, and then we wanted basically to have every elementary school feel like they had people on this board that represented their subdistrict or represented their building. I mean, so that's where the 7 criteria came from.
But you did recently or currently, you just said that you felt like that last one wasn't reached by that.
Well, so Wiley
family, that's not the case.
Yeah,
so.
right. I mean, I think there are technically 2 BOE representatives they're attached to Wiley, but they're also attached to, I mean, like for example, my subdistrict has primarily Yankee Ridge, but it certainly has part of Wiley. And Brenda's has got the northern part that has the entire northern part, right? That's attached to Wiley.
Yeah, but they're also attached to other schools too. Like
Right.
in one street, I have students who go to 2 different schools on the same street due to.
And it's a Robbie subdistrict has reached into Wiley as well. And I also think that yours, it's a big part of it.
Well, I also feel like now that we also, with dual language schools and petitioning and number, I mean, it's not necessarily as like a clear cut as when,
absolutely.
That like, oh, this location of your house means you go here. So I don't know, is there a way to know any of that information as well? Like,
and who knows, we might, I mean, it's very rare that we do this because it's very politically challenging, but we could redraw the elementary boundaries sometime in the next decade, right? And that whole input might be just moot.
Sure, I guess I mean, I'm not super trying to open that can of worms right now, but I think I'm just saying like the idea of like that last statement, I think also maybe, I mean, I think it's it's consideration, but now that we know that it's not as like, oh, you live here and you automatically go to the school. That is not necessarily the case anymore. Or maybe, I don't know. I would just be curious what some of the numbers are on that, like as far as like the representation, or how do we know, like you live in Wiley district, but you go to how many percentage of students don't actually attend there, and they go to other Urbana schools, not, I don't know. I would be kind of curious.
We have a different mapping software that's separate from the GIS data that just has our internal data, which has a lot more student data that we can use for, I think, what you're asking for of what students in what neighborhoods are in which schools and which programs, and even demographically internally to the students, not to the neighborhoods, which may not be 100% representative, since sometimes the younger families might be different than the older families who don't have school-age children. But we have that in our 5map software, which is a separate package. But that's something else, a tool that we can utilize moving forward.
Your mic's on.
It just, yes, good, yay, go data.
So, any other further comments or questions? So I guess my recommendation would be that as a topic on our next study agenda, we revisit this with a little more information on how to use the software and inform the public on how to do all that, and possibly even submit potential maps to us. Sound good?
Yeah.
Great, thank you. All right, so 12.0 is our Action items on our consent agenda. We have the minutes of the September 21st business meeting, October 5th study session, October 12th UEA BOE roundtable, October 14th special meeting. We have bills and checks for the education fund for $1.38 million, O&M fund for $84,000, transportation fund bills for $126,000, working cash bonds for $160,000, tort for $65,000, payroll for $4.6 million, and Urbana adult education for $160,000. There's a list of personnel items. We've already approved the administrative personnel item. 12.5 is approval of hazardous areas for transportation. 12.6 is a renewal of the MTD contract. 12.7 is Press Plus 107, which we talked about last time around. 12.8 was the Equity Task Force Policy draft.
I was just gonna say, let's add
Draft policy, which we discussed earlier this evening. 12.9 is the Hope Springs Agreement we discussed last time as well. And 12.10 is approval for a life safety amendment for the Thomas Paine Elementary School roof and HVAC work. Does anybody wish to pull any of these items off the consent agenda?
Oh, it wasn't, because we didn't notice it, so.
Maybe we couldn't act on
We
it.
couldn't act on that.
Okay, hearing none, is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I move that we approve with the amendment of adding draft in front of educational equity policy.
Is there a second? Is there any discussion? Roll call, please.
Member Hassanaka,
Yes.
Member Hall,
Yes.
Member Ogalski,
Yes.
Member Orr,
Yes.
Member Carter votes yes, Vice President Exum,
Yes.
and President Pulaski.
Yes. Consent agenda approved. 13.0 are individual action items, starting with gifts, and this is going to take me a while. The following made a donation to collectively purchase a bench in Ryan Woodson's memory at Emil King Elementary School. David Adcock, Julie Arazi, Carolyn Brown, Linda Darr, Lisa Ferguson, Maggie Kinnaman, Debbie Malone, Jill McPike, Meg Miller, Hope Morrison, Elizabeth Pitsley, Gloria Rayner, Ruby Racone, Terry Schmidt, Yvonne Yatoski, Ellen Werberman, Eunice Weech, Jenny Brewer, Sheila Butts, Laura Campbell, Magdalene Owen, Lee Ayler, Oyata Hani, Anna Casal, Kara Maruzzi, Renee McElwine, Matt Mockbee, Missy Schluter, Lisa Stiverson, Sally Thompson, Michelle Turner, Amy Webb, Bihu Zhang, Randy Ashman, Tim Cook, Don Daniels, and friend co-workers of Carla Woodson. The following is a list of donors and instruments donated to the USD band program: and Sataman Armstrong flute, Bill Brown King cornet, Cynthia Coleman Yamaha clarinet, Bill and Lisa Bavaric Yamaha clarinet and Yamaha percussion kit, Jacqueline and Michael Hanna snare drum with stand and drumsticks and an oboe, Michelle Nelson, Lawrence Angrave, Eastman trombone, Annette D'Angelo, Bach trumpet. Harbor Freight Tools donated a $200 gift card to the Urbana High School Auto Shop to shop for tools or shop items as needed. In support of their energy efficiency programs, Ameren, Illinois offered generous incentives to allow the district to receive 16,000 LED light bulbs for free. The district is currently in the middle of an application process with Ameren for more installation incentives to pay for part or most of the installation of the bulbs. Is there a motion to accept these gifts and send out thank yous?
I'd like to move to accept all these lovely gifts.
Is there
Second.
Second.
all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you, everybody. Very generous. We do have a call for future special executive meetings. Tuesday is our, at 6 o'clock is our special meeting board retreat at Anita Purvis Nature Center. And Monday, November 1st at 6 p.m., we have a special meeting with regards to student discipline matters. Superintendent's report.
I'm trying. Oh, there we go. All right. So, John. Okay, we've already talked tonight. Student-led conferences are coming. So this document has been shared on social media. I've shared it on the update. I believe it's on the website. So each school has a document where you can go in and depending on how your school organizes parent-teacher conferences, the student-led conference links there. We encourage all families to choose either an in-person option. Our teachers will be in the buildings from 4 to 8 or 8 to 11 on Friday, 4 to 8 on Thursday. And there also is a virtual option for families. So we're excited to be able to continue to offer both. I know I did a lot of our conferences via Zoom, and it was really helpful last year. So I'm hoping parents will choose to do one or the other. Panorama survey. I know we've talked about Panorama here at the board level. The Panorama survey is still open, and we encourage all families to go in. You did not receive the email it didn't come from me or Mrs. Norton or the school district. You actually received the email directly from Panorama. So this is an anonymous survey. We really want families to go in. Again, we know surveys are not getting to everybody. So we're trying to get this word out in as many ways as we possibly can. I know it's gone out in the Family Focus as well, and in lots of other venues and other ways that our schools are sharing it. So please take a few minutes. And this is our social emotional learning survey that we've been talking about here at the board level. I had a fantastic first meeting today at the high school. So we are moving forward. I think I shared with board members that our consultant that we've been working with has not been traveling. And we really didn't want to wait any longer to get this off the ground. So today I had the first planning meeting with a large group of high school staff, and we set a timeline. My goal is to seat 2 student ambassadors by the November 16th business meeting. That might be ambitious, but we're going to really try. So we have an application that we've created. We have a process. Students will apply, answer essay questions. We're going to offer some other opportunities for them to submit a Flipgrid or video. And we have a committee that we're creating a rubric to anonymously preview and assess the applications as they come in. And then the committee will recommend I have no idea how many students are going to apply, but the group today is so excited and they've already started kind of spreading the word to the students. So we may have 30 students to look through, or we may have who knows how many. So our plan is to bring the recommendations from that committee to the board level. We'll have interviews. So from myself and 2 board members will participate in that. We also have a policy, a student ambassador policy that is part of press that we'll also bring to the board at our next study session meeting for you to consider and hopefully approve at the November 16th meeting. That will have some administrative procedures on how we're going to go about this and actual formal process that will be part of our board policy moving forward. So I am super excited about this. The teachers that we were working with today are really energized, and I'm excited. I think we're going to have some fantastic students. Academic monogram was last Wednesday. So here are a few pictures of, this is a great event every year where we highlight and celebrate the academic achievements of our students. So these have also been posted. So kudos to all of our are currently our sophomores, our juniors and seniors who were recognized last week for their academic achievements from the previous school year. We are closing out, and we did close out last week our Hispanic Latinx Heritage Assembly, and these are a few pictures from the high school. The students, it was fantastic. They shared lots of cultural dances, songs, oratory. Mr. Nance is there dancing on stage with the young people. We also have an assembly coming up at Dr. Williams this week. So we still are kind of closing out that month-long celebration of Hispanic heritage. That is the last. Oh, no. The Tiger Marching Band Food Drive, October 29th on our Friday off of conferences for our students. We are collecting, we're helping support the Tiger Marching Band's efforts to collect donations for the Eastern Illinois Food Drive. So this has been shared via social media as well. So we encourage you to support the Tiger Marching Band. Cross country, our boys cross country team won last week's Twin City cross country meet for the first time since 1999. Congratulations to cross country. Sam Lambert there took home an individual win. That trophy is like almost as big as him, right?
Oh my gosh.
The way he's holding it looks so heavy. So congrats to the cross country team, and they've been working really hard this year. So I know Coach Baroki's in there too. So congrats, guys. Upcoming dates, we've talked about conferences. On November 5th is our next staff development day. That is a no school attendance day for our elementary kids, and an early dismissal for middle school and high school. And then, of course, Thanksgiving break. And yep, and then all the FOIAs, there are a lot. So Smart Procure, purchase order number. If purchase orders are not used, a comparable substitute is acceptable. Purchase date, line item details, line item quantity, line item price, vendor ID, name, address, contact person, and their email address. DRG Holdings, LLC, current student transportation agreement and addendums. Local labs, a list of all materials in your district that fall under the 1619 project. I don't know what the 1619 project is. What is that, Lori? Okay, thank you. CUCitizensAccess.org, all employees' names and positions, annual salaries or wages, total compensation, including health insurance, a housing allowance, a vehicle allowance, a clothing allowance, bonuses, loans, vacation days granted, and sick days granted. WCIA, number of hires, the number of resignations, the number of terminations, and the number of retirements, including the date from August 26, 2021 through the date in which this request was fulfilled, including the position of each staff member and any additional notes associated with the date. Where possible, specify when a resignation, termination, or retirement was based on a statewide mask or vaccination requirement for educators, total number of hires, total number of resignations, total number of terminations, and total number of retirements in 2019 and 2020, including any additional notes associated with that date. Local labs, all data of any faculty or student with a COVID-19 positive test result, COVID-19-like symptoms, or close contacts to a confirmed COVID-19 case that were reported to the local health department over the previous 7 days. Please provide all details that were provided to the local health department. And those have all been filled.
Board reports.
I'd like everyone, if you get a chance, to take a look at the resolutions committee report and let me know. This is very lengthy, but actually there's only 23 resolutions that we will be voting on. And so if you could get back to me and let me know what your choice is, since I'm the delegate, when I go to Chicago for the joint annual conference, then I'll take everything into consideration and go with the majority vote. Our board. So.
Yeah, and for the public's information, so at the III conference in November 19th, there's a designated delegate from every school board that decides for the highest, the body of the collection of school boards, what policies it wishes to promote in Springfield involving education. So what that body decides in Chicago on November 19th matters quite a bit. So please, board members, and look over this, and the public too. Please give us comments with regards to what input you want to provide. Brenda, when she votes.
Thank you.
Any other board reports?
Have we reported back on the Illini Division dinner did that happen since our last meeting? I can't even remember.
Yeah,
Did we already talk about it?
I can't remember if we.
Okay, I'll mention it then if you guys don't mind. Brenda and Tori and I went to the last Illini Division dinner, which was it last Thursday? 2 Thursdays ago. Lost the time. And that was at sorry, which school?
Atwood Hammond Grade School.
Arthur? Did you say Arthur?
Atwood.
Sorry, Atwood School District. And it was nice to see everybody well, not everybody, but a reduced number of people from our division's dinner and hear the speeches. And we had 2 breakout sessions. The one I attended was about advocacy, the governmental advocacy that school boards can do for their local and statewide and national elected officials, which was really informative because we can be advocates as parents, but as board members, we're in the unique position to be able to advocate for our districts on a governmental level and get the attention of our elected officials in ways that other people might not necessarily be able to do, which is kind of what this also helps feed into. I don't remember what the name of your panels were though.
It was about mandates. And yeah,
It was good info.
it was good info. And the other thing I just wanted to say was that we will be hosting the dinner in March, I believe it is.
Oh yeah.
February. Okay, thank you, Lori. February. The Illini Division dinner. So
we've been put on notice.
Do you board report, Robbie?
I have 3 things, I guess. So one, I just noticed during this meeting, I'm sitting in front of the banner that says Promise School-Based Health Center, and I'm on the committee for that now. So we had our first meeting last week, and there'll be 3 more throughout the year. But just so people know, there is a health-based clinic adjacent to the high school that they'll take people of the public, but it's primarily, I think, intended for students. And those in the middle school and the high school, after they attend their first visit with their parents, can then attend all subsequent visits, just being from the middle school chaperoned over for their appointments, and then chaperoned back, or the high school just walking over. So it's a really good way to do your medical care. So I think it's, they do flu shots, they do all sorts of things, physicals, just your regular stuff. Yeah, they have mental health, they have dental, not currently dental, but soon to be dental. Like birth control and, sexual type stuff. So then at number 2, I was going to say, tomorrow night between 5 and 7 at the Urbana Middle School, Piatto To Go has a truck with the goal of raising money for the PTSA. So go there and eat some food. And then the third thing is I received, this is more informational, I guess, but today I received some communication from some teachers at Leal. I don't know if the problem is just at Leal or if it's district-wide, about the nighttime custodial staff not actually cleaning. And then that burden falls upon the teachers of the classroom to then disinfect their rooms and do all this COVID precaution stuff. So, there's some issues there. I don't know. But that needs to be looked at, I guess. Yeah. And then the third thing, am I able to comment about the FOIA requests, or is that over? So for these FOIA requests, I just want to ask, this local lab thing where it says all data of any faculty or student with COVID-19 positive test results, etc., please provide all details are provided to the local health department. Are you giving them names of people? Because that's what that says, really. Yeah, I
Yeah,
think
we
that is
don't-
confidential. You're not able to
Yeah,
do
we
that,
don't
right?
break any FERPA or HIPAA.
Oh,
laws.
so that's the stuff where it's all crossed out.
It's all-
So I mean, so
yeah,
that
all
entire
redacted.
document is crossed out probably.
Yeah, it was mostly
So-
redacted.
Yeah.
Just the number of results,
Okay.
the numbers.
No, that's fine. I'm just making sure because,
Absolutely.
They can
It seemed
ask for
preposterous a little
anything,
bit to me.
doesn't mean they're gonna get it.
Yeah.
all right.
Yeah.
And then another comment is, for the 1619 project, when we're talking about DEI issues, that is basically because the United States history is taught by the perspectives of white Western Europeans. And so this is what some would consider the real history of the United States. So that might be a good thing for people to know about, actually. And I don't know if I'm not trying to push curriculum, but just being aware that that exists is a good idea, I think.
Absolutely. Any other word reports? Okay, I have one. So I want to address an item that came up in tonight's public comment. I've been talking to Ms. Kantorovitz the past week or so, and she's absolutely right. In terms of some of our committees being constrained by the OMA. Basically, this comes out of a 2019 ruling by the courts with regards to committees that support boards. So any subcommittee of the board that does board work is subject to the OMA. So we've got like 12 different subcommittees. One example of which does not actually report back to the board is the Health Center Advisory Committee. It's more of an executive administrative committee. But the Parent Advisory Committee, which is referenced in our policy manual, the Equity Policy Force, which reports back to the board, the Property Committee, and probably the Calendar Committee are all board committees, and hence basically all meetings of those committees are going to have to follow the rules of OMA going forward. So we're basically going over all of our committees and trying to figure out which ones of them really report back to the board, which ones of them report back to the superintendent. And we're going to make sure we're absolutely following this going forward. Traditionally, the OMA training that we had received in the past hadn't covered this very clearly, but the most recent version of IASB's OMA training online, which I just took last week again, that does spell it out. So we will follow OMA going forward. I apologize for that oversight.
Oh, could you reference the 2019 ruling? Do you know when in 2019 that came out? Because that's when I renewed my training as well. And
Well, they
the
probably
summer of
They
2019.
probably hadn't time to update the training, but
Yeah, because I was going to say, I did it that year and I don't remember seeing anything
Yeah, I
about
mean,
this and that, but I did
those-
mine through the Secretary of State's office rather than the ISB, so
yeah.
I don't know.
So yeah, that's something our lawyers had made clear to us as well, because I went to them right after I heard this, was that lots of school districts have not followed this as well. Yeah. So, no.
No. And strategic planning is the other one.
Right, strategic planning is going to, the reports back to the board, obviously. All right, there are no further reports. I entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thanks, everybody. Good night.